Hello class, this is the second lecture now. We're going to continue with the defense of liberal arts and why we engage in this study. And as we stated before, it is going to provide us with an education that will equip us to be fully human, and it is something that will help us transcend the many assumptions and contexts in which we're born to be able to identify ourselves with the best that mankind has had to offer. So here we go on the third component of this, and that is when we engage in this form of education, what we want is what's called a worldview education. So it is not enough to be a liberal arts college, which thankfully ACU goes beyond that. It's not enough to read the great authors. It is for you to be able to integrate what you are reading and to analyze it from this prism of a worldview. So understand how a view of life works in integration with all other areas of life. So a worldview focus is going to help you understand the basic tenets and ideas from any given perspective, not in isolation, but as a whole. And a worldview is a structure. And so in that structure, you're going to have more or less basic beliefs. And by understanding the more basic beliefs, you can make better sense of the less basic beliefs. So that's going to become more concrete for you as we unfold as the course develops. So a worldview focus entails that you seek understanding and to understand meaning through integration. So how do all the parts pull together? May it be the human person? How many aspects are there to human nature? We're all equally human, but we are not the same as individuals. And what distinguishes us? That is the factor of either being a believer or unbeliever that has a significant effect on a person. That is the factor of either being male or female, and how does each influence us as individuals. How is male, how do we understand male, and how do we understand female, and do we understand them as rooted in the being of God? How do we understand the educational level at which we were brought up, the time period in which we were born, how the sports and the media that we watch, how that influences who we are. So how do we put all of these things together? How is it that certain events in our life had a great impact? I was 18 years old when 9/11 occurred. If you were my age and you view that colors your perspective of our times differently than if you were born in the 1980s during the Cold War, or you would have witnessed certain events like the assassination of Kennedy or the first landing in the moon. Those are different events that can kind of shape your consciousness, and by which become distinctive ways of understanding life. The fall of the Berlin Wall would be something that you will not forget. So those are events. So how do we integrate those things into a coherent and comprehensive view of life? And that's what you try to avoid. What you try to avoid in this type of worldview focused education is a degree of specialization where you lose sight of other areas of life. So specialization is all well and good after you have a good worldview basis. So specialization is part of an increased knowledge and awareness about the world. Given the degree of excellence that we have attained in technology, science, and medicine, and literature, and all these areas, there is so much to be known that not one person can encompass that, and we cannot all serve equally productively in every area. So we need to channel our gifts and abilities and the resources that we have. So specialization is a great blessing, great boon. The problem is when you become you specialize in an area and then you fail to grasp the more basic foundational pieces. So if you become a psychologist and if you specialize in communications and let's say teen development, and then that becomes the prism by which you see life and how you interpret teenagers, rather than first looking at them as human beings that are made in the image of God, that have been made with the purpose of glorifying God, that have been given a mind, that they understand the world, that they have emotions, that they have actions. You're going to have to go beyond just psychology to make sense of the human person. Psychology is the study of the logos, or the human mind or psyche. But that doesn't explain our ontology. It doesn't explain ethical behavior. Just because you feel like harming someone doesn't mean that it is either morally acceptable or reprehensible to do so. Those are ethical questions that need to be answered. There are also what's called metaphysical implications of our decisions. So all of those things have to come together, and a worldview education enables us to see that, enable us to make sense of reality at a deeper level. So specialization, while there is a blessing, if we simply specialize without the basic understanding of life and of good and evil and of God and man, then at that point we're doing it at our own expense and at the expense of others. Because remember, specialization in different areas, we don't only operate in one dimension in our lives or in one sphere of life. I am a father, I'm a husband, I'm also a teacher, and I'm also a student. I'm a son, and I play different roles and I teach different subjects. And so in all of these relationships, how do I learn to function as a human being and to be the best I can be? Well, that will require me to be able to make proper distinctions. I'm also a citizen. I also vote. I have to make political decisions. I have to make economic decisions, as well as relationships. I have to ascertain where my time is best spent. I have to learn how to communicate with people. So all of those areas of life are going to come down to influence in the whole of our person. That's where we want an education that will integrate worldview. So that when I make decisions, there are some decisions that I know are tentative and maybe wise or unwise. I'm not sure. Time may tell. When I'm purchasing, let's say, a scope for my rifle, it may turn out to be the case that I should have bought a different scope. I thought that this was the best brand. Or when I buy a tablet and I buy an iPad, I should have bought something else. Those things may turn out to be true or false, but the fact that I exist, that's something that I can have certainty on. The fact that God created us in His own image is something that I can rest assured. The fact that He created us with complementarity and with a purpose, and the fact that Christ came to atone for the sins of mankind, those are things that I can know for certain. The 10 Commandments and how to put them into practice at a basic level, I can understand that. So there are things that are that could be proved wrong. There are things that will remain with us, and we need to be able to discern to have integration. The other one is that we have to be able to look into the work of art that we're reading, or a painting, or the movie that we're watching, or the theater, and be able to see how it is an expression of a worldview. How each person and character in that story is acting out of their own beliefs. And that's part of understanding the whole person and the motivation that they have for doing what they do. So we don't dehumanize the person or simply become perplexed by it. Like one response to Hitler, for example, is to simply otherize it, and that is just speaks of it as something incomprehensible, wicked, vile, cannot be made sense of. It's just horrible, monstrous. That's one reaction to it. The other one is to try to see what ideas enter his mind. Why does he believe that there are such a thing as parasitic human beings? Why does he believe that the eradication of one will lead to the advancement of others? What doctrines were circulated at the time? Why did he not see that these human beings have a soul and that there is a God to whom they belong, and that he, by transgressing that, he is not terminating their lives but only destroying their physical existence? Why doesn't he see those things? Well, that's what I like to understand. Who was his father? Who was he raised by? What ideas were influenced by? What was the state of Germany at the time? What had weakened the conscience of the Germans? What led them to take orders and to carry these ideas through? So that's a way of more fully understanding this worldview integration as it is expressed in a culture. And ultimately, what we have to recognize is that every culture is the manifestation and the embodiment of a worldview. So even though there are many cultures that may be built upon secular humanism, right? Each distinct culture has something that is different from the other ones. So even on religions, as we know, like Catholicism in Portugal and in Chile and in Brazil are very different. So what is it that, how is it that a human person gets the culture around it can reshape the belief systems that we have? So we don't want to go for what's called an anti-intellectual interpretation of culture, where people are just somehow formed in the way they are, and they're just following the beliefs that they do, and the Polish people like the way they are, and the Germans are the way they are, without exercising our mind to say what makes Americans Americans, what is distinct about them, what are there different regions in the United States, what has been the historical influence of each region, and so on. So we want to go and push ourselves. Why is it that some works of art endure through time and are admired by all cultures? Why is it that Shakespeare has risen to the top as a writer, and why is it that so many people long to see Hamlet and Macbeth and many of his tragedies? What does he communicate? Why is it that the Iliad still resonates with us, even though it was written 2,700 years ago? So one important component of this education is that the selection of books and materials that are covered in your classes are the cumulative achievements of culture. So each culture produces in different areas. It could be painting, architecture, it could be sports, it could be music, and then those contributions are judged by other human beings over time. So the artists that used to be famous in the 70s and 80s may not even be known today, because critics and judges have realized that their contribution was not lasting. What you're dealing with is what's called the great books and the great thinkers, and these are the books that critics over the years, decades, and centuries continually look back to and see a certain depth of inquiry, certain understanding of the human condition that is the deep calling unto deep. So there's a certain longing and certain questions that we're wrestling with. There are certain tragedies and certain vices or virtues that we most readily see and admire when embodied in others. So the books that are selected are books that have been agreed upon, contributions by the greatest mind. They have been long-standing, and they are part of an ongoing discussion that is grounded in well-informed and well-structured thinking. So those are components that we don't easily disregard. So when you read a book, let's say you're reading Oedipus Rex, which you may read in one of your humanities class, and you don't see the point of it, you have the burden of trying to make sense of why is this work important, why is it that I am not seeing. Those are considered works of art, so most likely if you don't see the point in it, the problem is with you as an interpreter and a human being, in your ability to make sense, and not in the work itself. So this is a long-standing tradition, and it is a tradition that informs us, informs our minds the best. And it also provides the most cogent and well thought out position. So if you want to know what a nihilistic human being looks like, or what a utilitarian looks like, or what does a totalitarian society embodies, you can read certain books and get a sense of that, or a romantic idealist. What would a person without any malice look like in the Navy, for example? And then you can read a book that exemplifies that. Now you may speak of what would a person who is trying to transcend the moral norms of his time look like. You read Crime and Punishment. So you have many. The book that I omitted on the Navy, it's Billy Budd. But there are many other works that you can come to connect with and appreciate and see the human condition. And by applying this type of analysis, then you come to know yourself better. So you understand the human condition by analyzing the lives of others. You come to see a deeper foundation for your own life. So I'm going to stop there for now.